Boom, boom, boom. Thank you for returning to video. My name is Mr. Davis, and we're going to get started by creating an ActionScript 3.0 document. I'm going to go ahead and save it as Mr. Davis. You should put your name. And I'm going to call this Wiggle Racer. I already have one that I've been messing around with, so I have some leftover files, but you should not. So once you have that there, click Save. And I already have one, so I'm just going to replace it. And we can get started. What this game is going to be is you're going to have to wiggle your mouse over your racer in order to get it to move faster than all of the computer players. And the very first thing we're going to need is a set of racers to actually use in our program. So to get started, I'm going to show you this cool feature where you can maybe draw a little neater with the line tool and all that stuff. So the very first thing I'm going to do is underneath View, there's an option for Grid. I'm going to click Show Grid, and this little grid will show up on your screen. It's not actually there, so if you went ahead and ran your program, it'd go away. This is just here for you to reference as you're drawing. So if I go back to View, Grid, and Edit Grid, I can change some of the properties. So I can change the color of the grid, I can show the grid, snap to grid, I'll explain in just a second, and I can change how tall or wide my little grid boxes are. So back into View, underneath Snapping, there's an option called Snap to Grid. And what Snap to Grid will do is it'll snap your drawing to the points on the grid. And what that means is if you, let me zoom in here just a little bit. If you were to draw something like a little bit off to the side of the grid, it'll snap it to the center, and that way you can line stuff up perfectly. So to get started, I am going to use my line tool. I'm going to make a black line, or stroke, black stroke with our line tool. And I'm just going to draw this sort of triangle shape, and yours doesn't have to be exact as mine, or exactly the same as mine, but I'm just going to get something that, oops, did that actually snap? Yeah, if you're having trouble having everything line up perfectly, what you can do is, under View, Snapping, make sure the only thing you have checked is Snap to Grid. And that way you know it's not going to snap anywhere else besides your grid. So I'm making this sort of shape here. If you wanted to play around with it, you can use the sub-selection tool. You know, maybe drag this point. Oops, I don't want the whole thing. Click, drag this point maybe down one and this one up. And I'm just going to get this symmetrical sort of arrow shape that we've got going on here. So now if I change my fill color to, let's say, blue, and actually I don't like the way that looks. I'm going to put this back to just be here. So I'm going to change my fill color to blue, use my paint bucket tool, and if I click inside of it, obviously it changes the color. So we're going to want a bunch of different shapes or costumes, I guess, whatever you want to call them, for our movie clip, so that we can use different variations for each one of our computer players and our own player. So we're going to turn this whole thing into a movie clip, but I'm going to play around with this just a little bit because I still don't like how this looks. So I'm going to drag this one maybe over one and maybe this one over one. I don't know what I want in life. I don't know why that looks so ugly. It looks pretty ugly to me. But anyway, play around with it until you get something that you want. The shape isn't all that important. I'm going to go with this. Why not? I'll go with this. So I'm going to save. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my my racer. I'm going to tap F8 and convert it to a symbol. And we don't need to export it for ActionScript or anything like that. We just want to give it a name for now that we will remember, right? So we'll just say racer. And actually, let's rename this to Racer Colors. So just go into your library, right click on it, click rename, and change it to Racer Colors. And now if we double click, we can go inside of it. And this grid's kind of getting in the way now, so let's get rid of the grid. We'll say edit, View, Grid, Show Grid. And we can leave grid snapping on and maybe even object snapping. It's just whatever you want. That part doesn't really matter as long as your grid is out of the way and you don't have to deal with it. We're going to rename layer 1 to art. Art sounds good. And we're going to create several frames for our movie clip that will hold each potential color that eraser could be. So for now, I'm going to make, let's say 4. So I'm going to click Enter Keyframe. It'll make a copy of the blue one. And I'll just make 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll have one that's blue. I'll click on this one, use my paint bucket tool. I'll make one that's red. So you go ahead and just make a few different colors. And I'll make one, let's say that is green. And then I'll make one that is yellow. So we have blue, red, green, and yellow. And if we run this, there's no stop or anything like that. So it's just going to give us this color random thing going on. So once we have that done, we can go back to our main stage and we can add in some other elements. Some of the other elements that we need are going to be buttons. Particularly, we're going to need a start button to start the game, and we're going to need an end button, or sorry, a restart button to restart our game. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. I'm going to use my rectangle tool, have no stroke. I'm going to make it, let's get fancy today. I'm going to use this blue to black gradient, and I'm going to set the rectangle options to be 30 on all the sides so I get a rounded rectangle. So I'm going to click and just draw something that I think is nice, and that looks pretty good. Select it all, tap F8, and what do I want to call this? I'm going to call this Start Button. Alright, so I can double click on that. Now I'm inside of it, and what I want to do is, oops, I messed up, right? I forgot to make it what? An actual button. It's a movie clip right now. I don't have any up, down, over, or hit frames. So I'm going to go back out really quick, go into the library where it says Start Button. I'm going to right click, click Properties, and where it says Type Movie Clip, and make it Type Button, and click OK. And now you can see the symbol has changed in the library. There's one small problem. It's because we already had this on the stage. It doesn't know to reset it. So what we have to do is turn this specific movie clip into a button itself. So in the top right, you see here it still says Movie Clip. Now we just need to change that to Button. And you'll notice if we drag out a new one, it'll always say Button. All right. So inside of our Start Button, we have an up, over, down, and hit. And the up and the over, let's let those be the same. So I'll just say insert frame. So those two will be shared. Down will have to eventually be moved down, and hit will be its own thing. All right. So we'll call this base. And we need a new layer for, you guessed it, text. So find text that you like. I'm going to make this text, let's go with yellow. It'll be yellow text. And what kind of font do I want to use? Let's see. I'm going to use the Sega logo font that I've got. You probably don't have that one, but I do, so deal with it. And remember now, if it's not one of those top 3, click Embed. Check All. You don't have to do anything else, but click OK. All right. So now that that's done, on my up frame of text, I'm just going to click somewhere and type the word, whoa, S-T-A-R-T. There you go. There I go. But as you can see, it's a little too big, so I'm going to change the font size to, let's say, 16. Does that look like it'll fit? Yeah, that looks like it'll fit. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to lock my base layer, because that shouldn't have moved at all. I'm going to select my text, and I am going to align it to the center of the stage. So that way it's, okay. It's not perfectly lined up. So let's manually adjust this just a little bit. So I'm going to drag that box up, and now I'm going to align it to the stage again, and there we go. That looks pretty good. The only other thing I need to do is, I don't need something on hit frame for text, because I'm going to remove it. The base layer covers everything on hit. For down, I do want to move it down a little bit, so I'll make a new keyframe on down. So now that I have all that, unlock base, select them both, hold shift, tap down, and now if everything is going correctly, should just be able to click, and now my start button is going up and down, and we still have this rainbow thing spazzing out at the top. So we want a restart button as well, right? So right click, duplicate, give it a new name. So instead of start button copy, we want to call this restart button, not retart, restart button. And we need to go inside of that. So just double click it in your library. And all we need to do is change the text to say restart instead of start. So on the up and on the down frame, you need to do this on 2 different frames. Otherwise, you're going to get some weird looking buttons. So once that's done, I'm going to make sure that this is all still aligned. Oh, not the down one. Shouldn't vertical align on down, just only horizontal align. And then let me make sure this one's aligned. Just make sure your text is in the center of your button. That's all I'm doing here. So save. And now if I drag out this restart button underneath start, I should be able to click on start, and I should be able to click on restart. Yay! I'm happy. Now that we know that all of our buttons work and we have some basic setup, let's start with the beginning and create an intro screen. So I'm going to clear out all this stuff. Actually, no, I'll leave the start button because we're going to use that. And I'm going to rename our layer to intro screen. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this start button around a little bit. Maybe, do we want it in the center? Yeah, I'll move it down. And we need to actually create a, what's it called? A text field, right? For our title screen, or the name of our game, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we'll need some static text. I'm going to use the same font that I used before, and I'm just going to make it big. So I'll say, let's try 30 for now. And I'm just going to click and type. What do I want to type? Wiggle Racer. And I know that's hard to see. And actually, I'm going to change the stage background. So I'm going to click somewhere on the stage, change the color to black. Yeah, I'll use black for now, just so you can see what I'm doing. And back over here, I have the word Wiggle Racer. And I think it'd be a little bigger than that, so I'm going to make it pretty much fill up the screen. Once I have something I like, I will select it and I will center it. And remember, make sure that's static. Make sure that this is static text because it will never change. So I'm going to call this Wiggle Racer, and I have my start button. I'll leave this spot blank so that later we can fill in some instructions, but for now, this is all I want. So I'm going to select these 2 things. I'm going to tap F8. I'm going to convert them into a symbol, and I'm going to call this intro screen. All right. And once I have that done, that's about all I really need to do for now. But let's start organizing our pieces in our library. That's something we haven't done yet. So if we go into our library, we have our intro screen, and then we have start button, and I guess that's the only part of our intro screen besides this text here. But let's say we end up adding a bunch of other things, right? We want to keep it in its own little organized container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder in our library. I'm going to call it just intro screen. Oh, it's already taken. Oops, my bad. Because we already have something named intro screen. Okay. I'm going to call this intro screen pieces. Yeah, let's go with that. And then all I'm going to do is take intro screen, drag it in there, and I'm also going to drag in the start button. And that way, if we expand everything, our start button and our intro screen are within this folder, and you can see it's already starting to look a little prettier and not so out there and unorganized. So we have an intro screen, right? The next thing we're going to need is an end screen. So let's make a new layer. I'm going to call it end screen. I'm going to drag it below the intro screen. How do we want to do this? I'm just going to lock the intro screen for now. And actually, I'll hide it. Let's do that. Let's hide it. And what I'm going to want is that some text that is similar to our title, right? So I'm going to go back into the intro screen really quick and grab this out. You don't have to do this way. You can just type it again, but I'm going to paste it on the end screen layer. Nope, it went all the way over here. So I'm just going to move it around, and this text will probably change. So either what you lost or you won, right? So what can we put this as? Well, dynamic text. And do we know for sure what this is going to say quite yet? Maybe not. So for now, we can just call this, end Come on, why is this not letting me type? Delete. There you go. End game text. I'll just call it that for now. And later we'll replace it with, you know, you came in first, you came in second, or something along those lines. And I'll just center it up to the middle here. And what else do we need? Well, we need our restart button. So let's go find our restart button, drag it onto the screen, and I'm going to center it to the horizontal center. And now we can go ahead and turn this into a movie clip, but before we do that, let's make sure it lines up with our intro screen, right? So I'm going to unhide our intro screen and only show the outlines. I'm going to keep it locked so I don't edit anything on accident. I'm just going to drag this stuff up a little bit, and I'm going to drag this down just by tapping the arrow keys until it lines up close enough. And there we go. So I'm going to hide the intro screen again. I'm going to select both of these, the button and the text that we have on our screen, tap F8, and we'll call this end screen. And if you go into our library, let's put this in a folder. So I'm just going to right click, click new folder, type in end screen pieces. This is getting a little messy, so I'm going to close my intro screen folder. I'm going to drag in the restart button to the end screen and the end screen to the end screen pieces. And there we go. So now we have two folders with all their components in them. Pretty cool, right? One thing I noticed really quick, I'm going to check something out in the intro screen to make sure that we use the right, in the start button actually, make sure we use the right kind of text. Okay, in our text, I ended up using dynamic text. It needs to be static. Having dynamic text is going to make your game run slower, and it's going to waste memory on the computer. So I'm going to go back in here, something I overlooked. See, even I am not perfect, and I'm just going to change these to static text. And since I copied restart button from the start button, I'm just going to make sure that this is also static as well. And I could tell by that dotted line that showed up when I showed the outline of our intro screen. So if you noticed before when I showed that, there was a little weird dotted line. Well, that was because I was using the wrong kind of text. So now I have an end screen and an intro screen, and they're not really doing anything right now, right? There's no code behind them. They're just placeholders for now. And eventually we will be changing these things. So let's go ahead and give everything an instance name. So I'm going to go back onto my main stage. I'm going to click on my end screen, and I'm going to call it MC for movie clip, end screen. So just like that. And I'm going to lock and hide the end screen. Check out the intro screen. Oops. And we're going to name this MC intro screen. All right, so we have MC intro screen and MC end screen. And if we go inside the intro screen, well, our title text, I guess if you'd like to call it, isn't actually going to be changing, so we don't need to give it an instance name, but our start button does need an instance name. So we're going to say BTN for button, and then we'll just say start because that is what it's going to be doing. And we go back to our main stage, go back inside of our end game screen. I'm going to click on the restart button. I'm going to call it BTN restart. And this time I'm trying to keep the same naming convention, so hopefully I can keep that consistent throughout this whole video. Anyways, our endgame text is going to be changing, so we need to give this a name. I'll call it TXT for text field. And what do we want to call this? Maybe message, TXT message. Yeah, that'll work. So once you have that done, just go ahead and save. You should have an intro screen and an end screen on your stage, and in your library you should have this Racer Colors movie clip. And I'm going to stop this video here. The next part will begin by getting the intro screen and the end screen working, and then from there we'll go to implementing the actual game. So see you next time.